Hey everyone, this is Patrick with the 307 RPG podcast, and I just want to take a moment and say thank you to all of our amazing patrons. It's because of you that we're able to do the things that we do. If you like our show and you want to support us, you can find us on patreon.com/theforgeherald. Thanks everyone. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello everybody, and welcome to the 307 RPG podcast. My name is Patrick, and I'm your host, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host.
I'm Nolan.
What is going on today, Nolan?
You know, another exciting day. We have got to play some games this weekend, get caught up with some Vampire, and
we
wrap it up.
That.
No spoilers. And
no spoilers.
Enjoyed the tale. Curious to see kind of how it all wraps up, but that is a good section. It's fun playing through history of Giovanni Chronicles. So.
Yeah, we're going to come to that in just a little bit. Cool. Other than that, did you do anything exciting this weekend, game-related, besides, I mean, we played D&D, but...
Played D&D, played Vampire, new patch for WoW, of course, so played some video game.
Some WoW, yeah.
New patch or new expansion for Final Fantasy 14, so played a little bit of that.
Nice.
You know.
I attended a Northwest Magic Judges conference this past weekend. Other than that, not a whole lot for me either.
How was that as far as a feeling of the community? I know we've talked a little bit about...
That's something I probably don't want to put on the podcast.
Fair enough. I was just going to say, I'd just be curious to see how the back of the house feels about some of the stuff, because we've been kind of disgruntled a little bit as players of feeling left out in Wyoming. And
so I was able to speak to other store owners who are judges and other judges who kind of are like what I do here. Here in Sheridan, I tend to run, as you know, this is more for our listeners, I run the pre-releases and Friday Night Magic when we have them, and release day drafts when we have them, so on and so forth. There are other people, obviously, who do the exact same for their stores, and I was talking to those folks, as well as a store owner. The store in Laramie is booming.
Okay.
But they are being very aggressive, like they expanded their store pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Aggressively, yeah, that's probably a good term. Whereas the store in Casper that has been kind of the hub for competitive Magic in Wyoming is their F&Ms are dying.
Gotcha.
Of course, we cannot. There are no stores in Wyoming that can host a PPTQ right now because it's all through invitation with Wizards, and no store is getting that invitation. So my understanding from the folks in Casper, the store there, this is Dave's Darts and Billiards, which is a wonderful store if you're ever in Casper. It's the other store there, Friendly Ghost, I think is what it is, Friendly Ghost Gaming.
Okay.
They are hosting Commander on Friday for Friday Night Magic, and they will push 30, 35 people.
Okay.
Which is great if you love games that take 20 hours to play.
Well, I think we're seeing a rotation, not necessarily a rotation of the guard, but I think it is kind of that, cycles of years, I guess, get 3, 4, 5 years of a competitive push or something, people kind of grow on, and if there isn't fresh blood coming in, which I don't feel like we've had a lot for a while, and they're starting to be a little bit, but it feels like that usually early start of stuff starts with, I think my first deck was Commander. It was one of those things. Sure. It's an easy way to teach people. It's a group play. So hopefully it's a sign of people like, you know what, okay, I'm done with this. Now I'm ready to be a little more competitive.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that it's the competitive players in Casper, especially, who are making that transition to Commander.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're seeing the opposite there.
Huh.
Whereas those guys who are highly competitive, who actually have qualified for Pro Tours, not getting a chance to play.
Crazy.
So, yeah, some interesting stuff down there. So it was kind of interesting to talk to those folks there. Let's see. Other than that, obviously this is our weekly podcast, so of course we'll be discussing news. There is no Kickstarter stuff, and then our topic of the night will be Clan Gangrel for Vampire the Masquerade. So let's go ahead and move on into news. Yeah, there's not a lot.
I didn't have a lot of luck finding some exciting things. I think we're all kind of waiting for Avernus. Cody, when he gets back to talking with us, his time frees up. He did get his, what is it, Bartles and Grimms?
Beetles and Grimms.
Beetles and Grimms. Salt Marsh thing.
Yeah.
For good, bad, or indifferent, if you're on the fans of those or hate those or whatever, we did finally get to see one in purpose, and it did.
I hope Cody does an unboxing video. That would be kind of neat.
Yeah.
So we can show people that.
We want to save that for him, but those did ship. And when did Salt Marsh come out? couple of months ago at this
About
point.
a month ago.
So not too bad.
No,
I mean,
it's
if
not
you
too
were trying to
long ago.
delay your play or whatever, but curious to see what people think of that as it gets used.
Yeah, so I mean, other than that, I mean, of course, that's not even an official Wizards of the Coast product. That's a Beatles and Grimm product.
Yeah, some fun stuff coming
There's
out.
not a lot coming out for D&D. There's not a lot over at Onyx Path. I know Onyx Path has a bunch of new releases on the horizon. They did just release Blood Seas for Scarred Lands. It's a book that I went ahead and picked up. It's only like 26, 27 pages. It's an advanced PDF copy of the book, which is, of course, where they do the whole look through this, see if you can suggest any edits, and if so, we'll make them, and then when the official PDF comes out, you get it.
Yeah.
It's like $4, $4 or $5, so it's really cheap. I've already
hard to
read the
beat.
book because, like I said, it was short. In fact, you will see that will be an episode of From My RPG Library here probably in the next few days.
Cool, very cool.
So, yeah, we'll be able to talk about that. Other than that, there's just not a lot of news. When it comes to announcements, we did just wrap up our very first Scarred Lands adventure.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about this last week. It was a Gauntlet of Spiragos.
Mm-hmm.
I went ahead and picked up Ring of Spiragos, which is a continuation of that one. And then, of course, there's the Dagger of Spiragos.
Okay.
Looking back, what did you think?
I liked it. I don't know. I like the world. I like that it's dark. Again, it keeps coming back, and I'll probably say it multiple times as we go. It almost feels like the Wild West. We haven't gotten a chance to be in a city. There's still these elements of wild that people aren't conquering and exploring, where it feels like so much of when we play Forgotten Realms, it's major city and then bandits and raiders on the outskirts and then major city.
Sure.
And so seeing this spot where it's, kind of you could have maybe a strong influence on the lore of the world, which is kind of fun of like, you do something, it's not, well, that was done by Dritz a long time ago, or that was done by Elemenster, or that was done by Manchun, or whoever.
Right.
So I like that. It is nice to have that world, and it's nice to read in that world, but, it could be that way for anything. We could be playing in Middle Earth, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I can't do that. That's Aragon's job, or, something along those lines would be, you don't want to mess with the lore. It's sacred. And here it's like, well, I don't know enough about the lore. The lore kind of happened. We're picking up the pieces. So if I do something dumb and accidentally burn down a town, I know that could accidentally happen, I guess.
Yeah, it could.
Because, you can't turn Waterdeep on its head. There's too many powerful people protecting it. So.
Well, wouldn't that just kill you? From a DM standpoint, I really enjoyed running that adventure. It was the book itself. This is a free adventure on Drive-Thru RPG, guys. So if you're interested in Scarred Lands, this is a great introductory adventure. It is very well laid out. I enjoyed, go ahead and make your players make a check even though the DC is 5. It just kind of helps you get used to doing those things, especially as you progress further along. Eventually, you're going to be able to say, yeah, your passive perception just notices this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
you can't fail this because you're strong enough.
yeah, but, and I think it also really, shows you, hey, guess what? You're level 1.
Yeah.
You are just starting out as an adventurer, and these are the things that, obviously as you grow, you're going to get better at this, but right now, you suck at it.
Well, and it felt like an old... It felt like an old story. It felt like a 3.5 tale. Some of the tedium that I think is lost in 5th edition of making these difficult climbing checks. It is part of an adventuring thing. And me being an older school player, I appreciate being able to be clever or thinking outside of the box to get around things. And it gave an opportunity for that. It didn't feel... It was railroaded, yes, to get to the story, but again... it still could fall off the rails pretty quick as well, and that was kind of nice.
Yep, absolutely. So kind of sticking with the whole White Wolf wrapping up thing, we also just wrapped up Blood and Fire, which is the second book in the Giovanni Chronicles, which you were mentioning earlier. And I'm, again, very, very curious, what were your thoughts on that?
I enjoyed it. I think as you play through the games and you get these people that are super powerful, it's always... humbling / frustrating to come up against things that are more powerful. And I think that's the nice thing about World of Darkness / Vampire, of these older things and having rules and being formal and knowing those rules. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a little cat and mouse kind of game, and that's intriguing to me as well, where it's not just all combat or swing my sword. And it was fun to be, again, when you're dealing with a world history, it's easy to imagine yourself there. It's easy to see the time period. It's easy to be, oh, I'm in London and this is what's happening and this is the era and the age. I know that. I've seen the pictures. It's not open to interpretation. It is what it is. And so imagining myself on the streets of London is so much easier, and it gets easier to role play. So I liked it. It was fun. Being incredibly powerful is scary, and how to use it at the same time not break the masquerade is a crazy challenge, especially playing a La Sombra where everything is, you have big power. I went into it as like, oh, I'm going to be a black wizard, basically shadow magic. And okay, well, half your stuff you can't do if somebody's seeing you, because that's a big no-no. And so that's huge restraint. And so it was fun. It was a great learning experience.
Good. Again, I enjoyed that one as well from a storyteller standpoint. There were some other frustrations outside of the game that made it a little bit more difficult, but I will say, if you're going to sit down and you're going to play something like this, come prepared to play. Because this is not the kind of game where you can just sit through and breeze through it. There's a lot of things. And I would say this is true of most RPGs. You need to pay attention. Otherwise, you're just going to be lost.
Well, and especially with the style of game, it's usually heavier topics, usually darker topics, and so being mentally prepared to deal with that stuff and be in the moment I think it takes a little bit more. So.
I think so too. If you are interested, we did, of course, record those. Those are live play or actual play podcasts that we have on our channel through SoundCloud. So if you're interested in that, you can always check it out. There will be a link in the show notes to our profile, so you can see all the different actual plays we do. We have Scarlands, we have Vampire, we have D&D. Nolan is currently running a homebrew D&D campaign, which has been exciting for folks. So things for you to check out.
Yeah, trying to create some content. So
yes. So that brings us to the topic of the night, where we talk about one of the 13 original clans for Vampire the Masquerade, the Gangrel. So let's talk briefly about their history. And I say briefly because there will be a little bit of segueing here. The Gangrel clan are the clan of the beast, really. These are their disciplines are animalism, protein, and I think fortitude.
Sounds correct. That's what their primary ability.
Yeah, I think those are
is protein. So
yeah, and what does protein do?
Well, I like the idea of again, like you said, the people of the beast, but the ability to, it's designed to survive in the wild and by evoking, basically natural predators. So the claws and the senses and the awareness, it's interesting. Again, and I'll let you get into the lore of it. It feels very much like the werewolf of the vampire clan. It is, we always talk about how to, whereas the last time I could see maybe a lawyer. I don't see this person being a lawyer for a conservation, thing or whatever. Maybe a forest ranger of some sorts. Like I'm trying to think of jobs where we live. I could see one of these living in the Bighorn Mountains or something like that, where it's like, right. I want to be here. I want to be left alone.
I just want to be exactly.
Yeah, and their job, air quotes or whatever, is to make sure that it stays protected.
Yep.
But
so let's talk about the lore of the Gangrel clan. There are different ways that you can go about this. This is the way I think probably makes the most sense for me. If I was, when I'm storytelling, this is probably the history that I would tell. The antediluvian of the Gangrel clan is a woman by the name, if I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, is Enowa. Now, Enowa is really kind of interesting. Enowa was a daughter of Adam and Lilith. And what's interesting about that is Lilith is the Dark Mother, and supposedly this was before Lilith became a vampire, that she had this child. Decided she didn't really want the child and just left her to be raised by wolves. And at some point, Enowa was impregnated by a wolf, and then the pups from that litter are what became the werewolves for Werewolf the Apocalypse. Eventually, Enowa was embraced by Cain, and she then became the Gangrel antediluvian, the founder of the Gangrel clan. Now, so I've always said, like you just said, the Gangrel are kind of like the werewolves. Mm-hmm. This is, I truly think this is where that tie comes from, is you see that linking with Enowa, between the werewolves and the vampires. Now, whether or not this is the actual history, again, it is so open for debate. And the reason we can't get a good history of the Gangrel is because they tell their history through storytelling.
Yeah.
And as we all know, if you play, what is that telephone game where things change as you tell the story. So we don't know what the 100% accurate thing is. We do know that at some point, Enoa either betrayed or was betrayed by the Ravnos Antediluvian. And this created a huge schism between these two clans. To this day, they bicker and fight and hate each other.
Yeah, and they seem like almost two sides of the same coin. And
yeah,
very
they
much
really do.
A little, one decided to be with people, the other decided to stay with nature.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot, some of their stuff overlaps. I liked, reading through and learning about them. I enjoyed the history of the spoken word, basically being the telling that you don't write it down. Even when you read stuff about it, it's like, I shouldn't be writing this. I'm going to get in so much trouble, probably even killed. Like it's a big deal. And again, it is opened up to interpretation of, I know they talk some bit about descendant of Odin and so much of
the Einherjar, the Scandinavian Gangrel,
Scandinavian,
are supposedly the Einherjar, which are what is that? The angels for Odin.
Darn close, if not.
Yeah,
it's a
no, I think that's the the Valkyries.
Yep.
But the Einherjar, I know, are high-ranking members within the whole Norwegian mythos. So so there we have this very powerful vampire who was considered a god and supposedly had the name of Odin. You mentioned the whole, I want to be with nature, I want to be with people. So Ravnos were the ones who decided to stay with people. They're very family oriented, and the Gangrel were like, nope, we don't want that. We want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting too, reading about just like talking about like the Dark Ages and as they came out of it, like that almost seemed like a time that they thrived, just because of so much mystery and the basically what the growth of people is their inevitable fear, and so the loss of woodlands, and then even people they talk about people losing the pagan faith allowed them to get no longer get away with stuff because it couldn't be blamed on that or allowed to do stuff or whatever. Now all of a sudden as people got smarter, almost, it seems like it hindered them as well, and so them doing their thing all of a sudden drew more attention, and it would be interesting to see kind of how that was from that time frame, and then all of a sudden cities are popping up and all they can do is just continue to grow deeper and deeper and hide in what's left of wilderness. It was
and even in the Dark Ages, they were actually more considered one of the low clans, just because they were those people who wanted to be left alone, and they were those scruffy looking people, and during that time period when Vampire first came out, and it's different now in V5, when a Gangrel frenzied, they began to take on these animalistic traits like tufted ears or cat-like eyes or even more pronounced fangs when they didn't
start
mean
to grow
show
muzzles
their fangs.
or even sprout a tail.
And now in V5 that's different. It is more it's a temporary change.
I remember reading something that they were saying, like, if it is an excessive thing or whatever, the storyteller has discretion to make it permanent.
Which is normal for rules for Vampire. The storyteller
cool.
always has final say.
So you can bring in some of that old school feel to it if you want.
Yeah. And and the other clans, especially like the Ventru, they had issues with the Gangrel because the Gangrel were not afraid to feed on animals if they needed to. They didn't have a problem. In fact, some Gangrel preferred to feed on animals because they didn't want to deal with humans.
Yep. Rather hunt and be natural than basically humans are a plague.
Yep. Then you had, this is the first I've ever learned about this, is the Islamic Gangrel, the Washin, I think is how you say it.
Okay.
Did you read about those guys?
Mm-mm.
They were like the desert nomads.
Makes sense.
They traveled the desert of Arabia and northern Africa, and come daytime they would just use protein to meld with the earth and just go down under the sand.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I liked some of the core of it. We talked about it a little bit off air, but just the embrace process of
I was going to get to that.
Not a lot of training, not a lot of here you go. See if you're strong enough, and walk away. And so after coming from, where it's so big of a deal of, you're raised by your sire, and who is your sire and who is this, and all of a sudden to just see this clan, it's just like, and I walk away, and good luck. If you're strong enough, you happen to survive a winter, or whatever they do, and you stumble upon somebody else, and it's their responsibility to.
Well, and they have to ask you a question first. So and it's poignant that you mentioned if you survive a winter, because that is the question they ask them. How many winters old are you?
Yeah. And if you don't know the answer, then they know basically that you're a pup. And if you know, then you've been trained. And then it's your responsibility of, to train that one. Like, you take it on. Like,
can you imagine being that guy who's like, how old are you? Oh, I'm 1 winter old. God damn it.
Yeah, like, so you don't know shit.
Now I have to teach you. This is not what I want.
Yeah, and I imagine that's probably how it is if they don't like, it's hard to say. Some of them might like it. Some of them may be designed for it. But I thought that was interesting of, you would probably have no clue who your sire is. You know who trained you and taught you, and that becomes your sire, but not your true one. And so it's just a neat, again, same game, same world, same, they're vampires, but it's just so much different between the clans. It is neat to get a little deeper dive on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Famous Gangrel? The most famous has to be Beckett.
Yeah. You see him mentioned a fair amount as being the odd one.
Yep.
I mean, because he does, like, maybe not like, but he's curious about people and history and lore and
travels all over, and he has to rely, and he has close friends who are not of, the Sombre Malkavian. He's just that guy that goes everywhere. With people.
I liked. I love how they claim status in their clan of combat and or boasting. And it's like, and they go back and forth, and it says, you tell a tall tale, I'll tell a story, you tell a story, I'll tell a story, until basically somebody says,
prove it.
Call. Yeah, it's basically poker. It's like, call, prove it. And if you can't prove it, like if the shit's gotten so deep, you're just trouble. Shit out of luck. Yeah. And I thought that was cool, because it makes it so they're not just violent Neanderthals. Like there is not necessarily a clan or a tribe, but it gives them that different edge, I think, versus just being a blunt instrument, which I think is kind of what I thought of them as first. Was like, oh, they're the animalistic ones. They're basically, werewolf druid style, whatever, and is what it is. And it's got some different levels. That the passing of the history of how they do that. They're old school. It's.
They're nomads.
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, they're very much nomads. I mean,
It feels Native American. It feels, just that way of life, respect the land. And so it would just be, I think I would probably not one of my top ones to play, but I think I would have a different level of playing them now. Yeah.
And of course, there's different variations of Gangrels. So let's kind of talk about that. We have the Greek Gangrel, which are more related towards, this is what they were called in the Dark Ages, and they were more related to what we would call a city gangrel today. City gangrel is a gangrel who prefers to live in the city versus out in the wild. They're just a little bit more adept in the city than...
A little more, they went with the idea of evolution. People are going to continue to grow, and we need to grow a little bit as well.
You do see Greek gangrel appearing in like Constantinople and Paris, and even a little bit in other cities like London, and which makes me think, you guys during the Blood and Fire had a run-in with a gangrel by the name of Jeffrey Lee. He was a Justicar, or not a Justicar, but an Archon. You would almost think that if he preferred to dwell in the city, that Jeffrey was a Greek gangrel.
Well, in the story, you find out, but he also mentioned that the ship was his. So it kind of made me wonder if maybe he was one of the shark ones. That their symbol is.
Nope, he's not. Okay. Because I don't think that variation was around there.
Gotcha. I was like, well, maybe that is their wilderness, is the sea.
And of course, moving into modern times, the city gangrel is what the Greek gangrel ended up becoming. People like nicknames for them is the coyotes, and typically these are Sabbat.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what the thing I thought was in it. The ones that are around people are considered Sabbat. It's not on the, and so.
And their disciplines are different.
Yep.
Instead of having protean, fortitude, and animalism, they have celerity, obfuscate, and protein, which scares the shit out of me.
I saw that and I was like, that is exactly what I would play.
That's like an assassin right there.
That is a spy and a half.
Yes. your typical Camarilla Gangrel, well, and Camarilla, I'm using that term loosely here. Country Gangrel, these are your independent and at one time Camarilla Gangrel. They are savage, they're vicious hunters. They are more comfortable in the wilderness between cities than they are in the cities. They can be hunters for the Sabbat.
Okay.
But what we're seeing there is, and we'll get to that whole thing, is there was a major transition within the clan. The Mariners are what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, these guys are interesting, and they still have the animalism, fortitude, and protein. These look like some of the pictures I've seen of them, creatures from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, web feet.
Yeah.
And sprout some gills and.
Yeah, they're
Waterworld.
mariners.
Yep.
So they're more adept to being in the ocean, in the waters. You talk about like the Lasombra liking to go to, enjoying, sometimes just going to the bottom of the ocean just to be kind of in that abyss. Imagine if they're just sitting down there and all of a sudden this Gangrel comes walking up to them.
Yeah, swimming.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up going on, dude? And there's no formal organization with the Mariners. They just they are who they are.
Yeah, they chose sea over woods.
Yep. We talked about the Washin. They are the Islamic Gangrel. Let's see. There are different Gangrel bloodlines, which is kind of hard to go into all those. There's so many to look at and read. When you look at Kindred of the East, when you look at Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom, you do have some offshoots of the Gangrel and in every clan, really.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting stuff in there. Gangrel tend to be very possessive. If you wander into a Gangrel's territory without permission, it could very easily mean final death for you.
Yeah.
They are the least social of the Canaanites. As we said, they have ties to the Gypsy people, which they tend to have. There is a tie to the Ravnos, which causes issues. You mentioned the embrace. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, no, go ahead.
I was going to talk about the embrace again. Did you have something else?
No, go ahead.
You mentioned the embrace, and it's much like how you guys were embraced in Blood and Fire, or in The Last Supper. Boom, you're a vampire. Go do this thing.
Yep.
And it's just like you said. Typically what happens is a Gangrel chooses somebody for whatever reason. Usually they realize that they're a survivor. And
I like that it was. Usually it's prey that puts up a fight. They didn't back down. They showed great quality facing their death and worthy of basically getting to be one of the clan.
And so they embrace them and leave.
Yep.
It's like, great, you're a vampire. See you later.
See if you figure it out.
Yep. And it sucks. I mean, because usually, you have these people who become vampires and they frenzy almost immediately.
Well, yeah, that's the hungriest point of your existence is right after.
So if you get embraced and say you're in Central Park, and that jogger happens to be coming by because
yep, it's time.
Yeah, and so whether or not you survive, and that's why they ask you, how long have you been around?
Yep, how many winners? Yeah, and I enjoyed them a lot. What? Okay, so what happened as we moved to 5th edition? Are they still in the book, or
they're in the book,
okay,
but they are not part of the Camarilla. So at some point, the Justicar Xavier went before the Inner Circle, which I think is really fascinating because that means he knew who the Inner Circle was, which is, I suppose the Justicars probably know, but not a whole lot of people do. I think Etrius of the Tremere is the most prolific Inner Circle member. So anyway, he goes before the Inner Circle. He says something to the Inner Circle. I don't know what was said.
Right. I don't think he utters a single word.
Yeah.
I think is what it is. And you've got to figure out nobody knows. He just says a word, whispers it, and walks out. And that's the mass exodus.
Just done.
As I say, what is months? It's within a month or two. They're gone.
The entire, almost to a man. There are some who held on, but almost to a man, they left. So, and that's, really kind of a massive blow to the Camarilla because, like we talked about last week, they lost the Bruja when Theo Bell killed Hardestat and Jan Penderzun. And then you have the Gangrel who were like, you know what?
Your two forms of muscle.
Yeah, we're done.
Peaced out.
Exactly. Yeah, your enforcers just walked away. Now, of course, they picked up the Banu Hakim, the Assamites, but they lost some huge...
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I hope they come out someday with what was said, but
I know.
it's like what word?
You mentioned in V5, so where they're at now. We talked about like when they frenzy. They do take on an animal feature. It is not permanent unless the storyteller feels like it has. They also have a compulsion, returning to an animalistic state. It says the vampire regresses to a point where speech is hard, clothes are uncomfortable, and arguments are best settled with teeth and claws. For one scene, the vampire gains a 3 dice penalty to all rolls involving manipulation and intelligence, and they can only speak in one-word sentences during this time. So they very much are animalistic in the way they are.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So, and that's what brings us to where they're at today. Again, I think some of the most famous... Gangrel Beckett has got to be the most famous. I mean, he just is. If you haven't read Beckett's Jihad Diary, it is a great book to read because it takes you, really kind of shows you the different editions of Vampire the Masquerade and brings you right up to, Final Nights and then into V5.
For a way to learn the history and the lore, it does such a good job of telling a story alongside it.
It really does. So that's the Gangrel clan. They're wild. They're nomads. They want to be left alone for the most part. There are some who do dwell within the city, but they tend to be the thugs for the Sabbat more than anything.
I think it would be, like I said, probably not one of the top ones I would play. Just, given that they're not necessarily playable since they left.
Yeah.
But also along the lines of, again, it's hard to play the nature druid in the middle of town, if that's a D&D reference, or even here, these guys seem to be very much loners, don't want to deal with people, and all of a sudden you're asked to sit at a table and play with a bunch of people as the quote-unquote lone wolf mentality.
Yep.
You don't necessarily gel, you don't necessarily blend, and it's hard to role play being a standoffish asshole. Just kind of, I don't like people, I'm here because I'm forced to, and that would almost be the reason why. So that would be the only thing I would say, is it would be difficult. You would have to have some good reasons why to be around people, and that's hard.
I don't disagree. Yeah, I know a good friend of mine, when we used to play many years ago, he always played a ranger in D&D, and he immediately latched onto the Gangrel. It felt very similar to him.
Yep, I could see it.
And he just enjoyed that. And of course he loves wolves, and that just helped perpetuate that whole thing. So
I like their skills. I would enjoy playing something with protein. Just, it's fascinating.
Oh, protein's a great discipline. And I did want to mention to everybody, so typically when Nolan and I do these things, especially when it comes to Vampire the Masquerade stuff, it's so much different than how we break down D&D classes, because it's just not the same. We can't sit here and say, yes, you need to put stat priority here, because we can't tell you what that's going to be, because it really is going to depend on the type of character you play.
Yeah.
We can't optimize a character for perfection here, because it's going to depend on the kind of character you want to play. We also can't tell you, hey, this is the best subclass, because there's just no such thing.
Right.
So what we do here is we do some research. We talk about a little bit of their history, where they're on now, different things that they can do. We talk a little bit about their disciplines. Typically, we either read through the clan book, and then there's a wiki that you can go to that has some excellent information. And I'm going to link that wiki in the show notes so people can see it and kind of see where we get some of the information that we get. So,
yeah, and I think, like I said, it would be a hard one to play. Trying thinking of jobs, that would be modern. Like I said, the forest ranger is probably easy, but again, why would you be in town? I think for the last one I talked about, it'd be fun to be an activist lawyer. I think maybe that's probably another one if you were like a wildlife conservationist, style business person who bought up natural space or whatever. And
I could see a rancher.
Yeah. Have a plot of land that it takes care of and uses it.
He has, hired hands to take care of the ranch during the day, and he feeds on the cows at night. things like that. And that's obviously we're in Wyoming, and that's a very common thing. So not feeding on the cows, that just that went sideways quick. So yeah, they're a really interesting class.
Yeah, I got more out of it than I expected from looking at it.
Clan. They're a very interesting clan.
And I think that's going to be as we deep dive into all of them too. I mean, just as somebody that's new to it, it's neat. I like a lot of what they are. I like the spoken word stuff. I think that again, with the boasting and stuff like that, if you decided to have that be a part of your character, I think that would be a great way to just, I'm a shit talking, storytelling son of a gun, and you know what? I have whatever you've done, I've seen it, I've done it, and been better. And you would hate to play with that person at the table, but if it got to levels of ridiculousness, and
then wait till somebody calls them out.
Yeah, like, what do you mean, prove it? Fuck you. Okay, prove nothing to you. You're not Gangrel. Walk away.
Exactly.
So, they're pretty cool.
Well, that is Clan Gangrel. Next week we will be talking about, Malkavian?
Wow, it jumps
if we're
up
going to
there.
do the first 7, or we can do La Sombra. But we skipped Assamite, so I was thinking we'd just stick with the Camarilla clans at first, and we can go to the Sabbat clans or however we want to do it.
No, I think that's a great idea.
So I believe it is the Malkavian, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. I don't do...
And then it'll be Nosferatu after that.
I don't do the alphabet. Just kidding.
Yeah, he doesn't. Letters don't count. We'll do Malkavian, then Nosferatu, and then it's I think Toreador or Tremere, and then Ventru. So, and I may be missing somebody in there.
Yeah, let's see. Here's the list of the 7 clans who are part of the camera. Bruja, Gangrel, Malkavian, Nosferatu, Toreador, Tremere, Ventru.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, Malkavian next.
Malkavian next.
I'm excited for the deep dive into this one here. This would have been probably the second choice for class I would have played for.
Malkavian are interesting.
So that'll be a blast.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, Nolan, I don't have anything else. Do you?
I do not.
All right, folks, that is going to be our show for this week. It is a shorter one than normal, but again, we can't break them down like we do the D&D classes. So we will be talking about the Malkavian next week. And Nolan, if they would like to get a hold of you, how can they do it?
I am on Twitter at nlameres, N-L-A-M-E-R-E-S.
And, of course, I'm Patrick, and you can find me at pretty much all the social medias at 307RPG, except on Facebook because it's dumb and it has to be at the Fort Herald. And if you enjoy our podcast and would like to hear our actual play stuff, you can find those on our SoundCloud page. Again, that link will be in the show notes. Nolan runs D&D. I'm running Scarred Lands and Vampire. Nolan is in every one of those. He plays in 2, DMs 1. I play in 1, DM 2. I just prefer to DM, so he gives me a break.
I prefer to play, so it's good
it
works out that way.
So, yeah, check those out. A lot of fun. We have a good time doing the things that we do. That's for sure. Nolan, anything else?
No. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.